Hi, I'm Matthew Carr. I'm the programmer at Southeast Games.
Shane Kerr, the art director, artist at Southeast Games, and yeah, happy to be here.
So you guys are talking about your game called Paint the Town Red. What is this game all about?
It's a first-person melee game at its core. It started originally back in late 2014. We made a game jam game that was quite popular. We made it in 6 days, and then we really enjoyed making that and thought we could make something much bigger. So we built the version that's on Steam now and will be on consoles at the end of July. Which was released in early access in late 2015. It's a voxel-based game for the enemies, so all the enemies are made out of voxels, so it's got dynamic dismemberment and destruction of sort of the enemies, which has obviously lots of fun, like they're very cartoonish, with lots of gore and gameplay implications, but it's got multiple modes. It's got these scenario levels, which are basically just big brawls in, like it's a biker bar level, a disco level, Pirate Cove. We have an arena which is more for challenges, and then the sort of the biggest part of the game is the Roguelike Mode beneath, which is sort of a massive multi-bio, multi-class, tons of upgrades, dozens of enemies, hundreds of weapons Roguelike Mode that we built over the last few years, and that is sort of where the story of the game is. And yeah, sort of got a lot going on Steam. We also have level editor with thousands of levels on the workshop already, and co-op multiplayer as well on the Steam version, so you can play through the roguelike mode beneath or all the other scenarios and arenas with up to 4 players.
That's super cool. Like you said, it was originally a game jam game. Like, is it like?
Yeah.
For you guys to see like this thing grow and evolve from like a thing you had to turn around in what 48 hours? How long was the game jam?
Yeah, it was the 7-day FPS game jam, so we had a week to make it, and then yeah, we just put it out there on itch.io, and it just blew up in popularity. We couldn't believe how much people were enjoying it, so it just became like a no-brainer for us to invest our lives into getting it better and bigger, and here we are now, finally, after a long time, getting it out of early access and onto consoles, and yeah.
Consoles, I know, is a big accomplishment for indie devs because there's a lot more regulation, a lot more certification. The process is a lot more jumbled than it is on like Steam, where you can kind of just patch whatever you need to. You know, you can put it in early access. It's a lot more limiting. What were some of the challenges when trying to get your game onto consoles specifically?
Well, obviously there's a lot of hardware and optimization based for problems, especially since going down to, you know, the Switch would be, I guess, the lowest end of the consoles we're going to, but we also have it on the Xbox One, PS4, and then the newer consoles, the Xbox Series X and S and PS5, which obviously those are a lot easier. So that was obviously a huge thing. We had to, you know, we did all the development in-house for all the console versions. And considering we're a team of 1 programmer, 1 artist, and 1 audio director, it's a lot of work. Plus self-publishing is a lot of work as well. So I think probably one of the bigger problems there, or one of the struggles we had, was doing all this while in early access, because when you have a popular early access game, people expect updates regularly, and so trying to keep the game updated on PC, on Steam, while developing the console versions, where you often have to sort of tear the game down and build it back up to optimize in drastic ways, it was quite difficult. But I think we did sort of the best job we could there. So pretty happy with how it's turned out, and the consoles are really happy with the performance and the resolution. We don't have multiplayer, like there were some things we couldn't sort of do with our team size, essentially, and also there's some performance implications. We don't have multiplayer or like the level editor user-generated content stuff on the consoles, but the full single-player scenarios scenarios arena and beneath are all there on the consoles. So huge amount of work, but we're very happy with what we've done.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people like expect like just multiplayer to be in every game now, regardless of the genre that it is. And like I don't think they understand, especially for a smaller independent team, like how much work netcode can be on the back end and making it work with all these different servers. And now with crossplay being a thing, that's now expected, which is insane. Crossplay wasn't even a discussion 10 years ago, and people are like, "There's no crossplay. This game sucks." You're like, dude, like it's still relatively new.
Yeah, and beyond that, there's just so many more layers of compliance for multiplayer, like interoperability or whatever they call it. So yeah, it just
Yeah, I
adds
mean that was
way
probably
more.
the bigger thing on the consoles. Really, like the netcode side is not a huge deal. Like some of the performance side of things is a bigger deal because you're having to do, the sort of the host server side is doing a lot more work, CPU wise. But just if we were to handle, Nintendo has their way of doing it. Xbox, PS4, PS5, all have different ways of handling multiplayer and lobbies and parties and all these sorts of things. And then it also introduces potentially a lot more bugs and would have a lot more ongoing work with the game on consoles. And it's just you've got to pick your battles, and that's sort of beyond the scope of what we could do at this time as a team of with one programmer essentially working on all of that stuff. It's just too much, I think. So there's always a chance in the future if especially on the PS5 and Xbox Series S and X, where they have the power to do the multiplayer, that we could explore that in the future. So
if you can talk about it, because I know there's NDAs and stuff when you're developing for certification and console, but was there any particular platform, because you guys did the ports yourself, that was more difficult than you thought it was going to be, or proved more difficult than other platforms? Like Switch is a big one because of the 2 docked modes and the low power, right? That's not as powerful as the Xbox or the PS4. Anything you can tell us about that process of porting the game to these 3 consoles?
I mean, it's funny, I could say that would be covered by an NDA, but I could say that certainly the Switch was the most difficult in terms of optimization. That was the sort of thing where, all right, we can get it running on the Switch straight away, boom, it's on there, it runs at 5 frames a second and crashes after 30 seconds, right? So that's great, that's step one. And then from there to where we have it now, where it runs, it's a all the visuals are there, great resolution and performance. That's a very long road. Memory being the biggest thing on the Switch, particularly for a game like this where we have a lot of optimization into sort of how the voxels are handled, because all the enemies have completely, can be just dice them up and cut them into little bits, explode them into chunks. That stuff takes a lot of memory, and optimizing takes a lot of memory because you're sort of offloading CPU work for sort of cached data in memory. So trying to get all that to fit within the constraints of the Switch was definitely a thing. But then the base Xbox and the PS4 are also not easy. Once you want to get those to 1080p, then there's a lot of work there. But that's the hardware side. And then on the a lot of the publishing side is also quite difficult and different per platform, and some of those were definitely more difficult than others. But I won't bother talking about that right now.
Yeah, is it difficult when you're making a game? I mean, because games usually transcend and can be played all over the world, whether you just have to do a translating thing for most of the instruction manuals and UI. But your game is violent, but it's kind of like you have red blood. Was there any implications trying to get that in certain regions? I mean, I know the EU is kind of weird about having red blood and violence in video games.
Yeah, well, we need to have a disclaimer on, I think, one of the platforms, right, Matt? For the store page?
No disclaimer.
No? Okay, yeah, we just had to edit some promotional art a couple of times, but nothing too drastic, which was surprising. But yeah, I guess
sort of
because of the
different per
comical
region as well. Yeah, we have like on the some consoles have different screenshots, and we have for different regions for compliance reasons. And then there's other things like just being a violent game. There's a lot of extra ratings work for different regions as well. But overall, it actually went a bit better than I expected, I think.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever, during this process, when your game, after the game jam and received well and was in early access, since you're such a small team, just you two and one other contractor, do you ever feel overwhelmed at times that there's like so much to do in the game and you're only such a small team? You don't have the budget to outsource other stuff and you have to do everything yourself, and like, what's that feel like?
Yeah. There was a few times there where it felt a bit daunting, and like because of the success, we just felt like we had to deliver. And there was a lot of opinions out there about what we were doing and what we should do, and kind of built the pressure up. But we eventually got used to that because we've been doing it for so long now. And it's just, we just do what we can and we accept whatever the consequences are, kind of thing.
And we also, it helped to define a scope early on on Steam and for early access and say, this is what we're building, and we did that, but we also did a lot more. Like the level editor was never planned originally, and that's sort of the biggest part of the game now on Steam. Is there's over 10,000 levels and things on the workshop. So there's obviously when you're on early access with a pretty popular game, there's so many people that want people want scenarios, people want more beneath, people want more level editor stuff, and just trying to balance how you're satisfying all these different people is quite difficult, while you're trying to also build this big game for multiple consoles and things.
Yeah, definitely. Trying to get through the noise of everyone yelling at you on the early access forums and looking for the feedback that's actually helpful and critical and stuff you can take into account and maybe actually fix is got to be daunting for a small team. You guys even have a social media manager or community manager. It's just you two. So.
Yeah, and that's sort of the thing. I think when you think about a small team, you're like, well, what we would really want is probably another programmer, another artist, or something like that. But what it turns out is you really just want someone to handle that side of things, particularly in early access. And when you've actually got an audience and a community, that's the sort of hardest part. And it's a bit unfortunate that we can't look at a lot of the stuff on there's a Discord and there's the Reddit and Steam forums and all these sorts of things, and we can't look at it all the time because there's only so many hours in a day. But that's definitely the hardest part, I think, about sort of seeing what bugs there are and what are relevant suggestions and issues to fix versus just noise.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise and a lot of misconstrued information and weird stuff that happens on specifically Reddit now. Reddit's gotten really bad the last couple of years, I've noticed, but you always have your Discord, which is usually pretty hopefully pretty clean, and then your Steam early access user reviews, because when the game is in early access, I hope that people give you a little more leeway as you're trying to still fix the game.
I think they do.
An improvement. Yeah, but once you come out of that early access, it's like gloves are off, right? People get really really brutal really quickly.
And we also have a pretty pessimistic attitude all the time. We're always surprised when everything does well. So we're even thinking once it comes out of early access, no one's going to buy it because they see an early access game and they assume, well, this is where it is now. Imagine what it's going to be when it's done. It's going to be 10,000 times as big as this or something. It's like, well, no, this is the game. It's just we're polishing it and whatever. But I think we've already started to see with the early stuff from the consoles that it's probably not going to be the case. I think it's done really well. It's actually increased in popularity throughout early access. We've even, we took the approach of starting at a lower price because we didn't really like the idea of charging people the full price for a lesser product, particularly when they're sort of helping us develop it. So we've raised the price a couple of times throughout early access as we've sort of finalized the features and put in the big modes. So once we added Beneath and got that to a working state, we've sort of got to the final price of the game, and it actually sells more now than it did when it was half the price 5 years ago. So well, not quite 5 years, no, it was 5 years ago, geez. So that's been really, really gratifying, and I think we haven't really seen it slowing down, which is surprising. So obviously it's got some sort of unique element that people enjoy.
Can you guys talk about the game is voxel based? What made you decide to go with voxel based, and where do you feel voxels specifically fit into gaming in 2021, or just in video games in general?
Well, for this game in particular, for starters, we had the Game Jam game where we didn't really think about voxels at all. We just wanted to have an art style that we could create quickly for the Game Jam game. But then it really worked well because it was a good contrast to the extreme violence, having these sort of blocky, cartoonish characters that Shane created.
Yeah, with the South Park kind of faces, and it's just, it's very comical, but still you get that good feedback from your actions with that voxel gore. It's like a really one-to-one kind of combat experience that we kind of craved when we were making it.
So that was the good thing. We had the big faces and stuff early on with these cartoons, and that they should have really good sort of reactions. When you hit someone, their face can change instantly to some squinting face. But then the next step was well, we have these blocky characters. Let's divide those. There's the head. Let's divide it up into 100 smaller blocks, and then be able to dynamically cut that up, and it gives you.
Yeah, and then what if we gave it a skull and put some brains inside and.
Yeah, and that's sort of good gameplay implication too, because then we have enemies that are very strong, can take a lot of damage, but if you damage their brain, they die instantly, or if you cut an arm off, they can't use that arm anymore. So there's that, but then it also, as Shane said, it has huge implications to like just the reactions of enemies. Now obviously they react really well when you punch them and hit them. They go flying around. There's lots of physics stuff going on and lots of just good animations for reactions. But having these sort of exact voxels getting bruised or destroyed when you hit them with different weapons is it makes it extremely satisfying. You can like kick someone against a wall. You kick them really hard if you've got like you're playing as a class that can kick really hard, or if you have there's a modifiers for scenarios. You can have a hard hitter modifier that just makes you bash people around really hard. You can smash them into the wall and they basically explode against the wall into voxel chunks that will stick against the wall and slide down. It's all that sort of stuff. It sounds really gory and gross, but it just makes the game that much more fun, having all this dynamic elements going on that react so well to your input.
And it helps sell the blood spread that happens, so we can call it Paint the Town Red as well.
But in terms of voxels, like in a larger sense, I think definitely outside of just gameplay stuff, voxels are a big deal in sort of graphics and rendering stuff right now. Most of the tech we see in ray tracing and things uses some sort of voxelization of the environment and things. But from voxels in terms of games, I think that we're going to continue. Like there's really exciting stuff out there. I've seen of some new voxel engines and games using voxels in new ways that I think it allows you to just do so much more. Like especially like content creation. All of a sudden, it's much harder for someone to learn how to 3D model. But if someone wants to add user-generated content to a voxel game and allow people to use something like Magica Voxel or one of these other tools where they can just build stuff out of little blocks, the barrier to entry for content creation for users is so much lower. So it's pretty exciting. I think a lot of games will start using voxels more, and we'll see some pretty crazy stuff. The CPUs can handle much larger voxel worlds.
So, and then my last question for you guys is, what's next for you for Southeast Games after you do a little more Paint the Town Red updates and patches and fixes on the console and the PC? Are you guys already brainstorming your next project?
Yeah, we've got some ideas cooking, but nothing concrete that we'd talk about yet. But we got some good ideas. I think very excited.
It's one of these
to get
things where, because we're programmer and artist team. A lot of the late work on Paint and Red has been programming, so Shane has actually been working on our next game for a little while, but definitely too early to talk about, but we're very excited about that one. It's different than Paint the Town Red, but I think there'll be a lot of similarities in a lot of the style of what we're
Is it going to be Paint Your Wagon? I don't know if you remember that Simpsons reference, but that could be your next game. Gonna paint your wagon. Gonna paint it.
Yeah, we're doing the Paint the series.
Yeah, we'll paint the fence as well,
Just coin it, man. Just coin it. Just like an assembly line. Just come it out, man. Just put it out.
Sounds good. I mean, that power wash game worked out, so maybe painting's the next step.
It really did.
That's true.
Yeah.
We'll just paint the fence. Paint Mr. Miyagi's fence. That'd be a great game.